call this meeting to order, and we do know that Mr. Cedillo is in a meeting right now, but he will be joining us a little later, and it's understood that we'll also be joined by Council Member Tom LaBonge in a bit, but I am honored to sit next to my colleague Curran Price, and we will call this meeting to order. And what I'd like to do is take item 3 first, out of order, and invite Eva Mitnick to come up, Director of Children's Services. And if Mr. Litt, if you could please read item 3.
Report for the City Librarian in response to motion Martinez, Wesson, Blumenfield, Weezer, relative to the Learn and Play pilot program to help young children start school ready to read and learn.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So please give us a briefing on this pilot program.
I'm Eva Mitnick. I'm the Director of Children's Services for the LA Public Library, and I'm here representing John Szabo, our City Librarian. We were actually first approached by Council President Wesson, who was very concerned about statistics concerning grade level reading, particularly in LA City, which are the statistics are dismal. Many of our third graders are having difficulty reading. And he approached the library knowing that this is one of our big pushes, our big initiatives, both to help kids who already learned to read, but also working with parents of preschool kids from babies to age 5 to empower them to get their kids ready to go to school, ready to learn. We, of course, have done story time in libraries for years and years, decades. We've worked with parents in libraries. But what we haven't done so much is go out into the community and find non-library users and talk to them, both to let them know about the important ways that they can get their kids ready to learn, but also, of course, to let them know about the library, to invite them to become library users. So we've been thinking about this for a long time. We've done some of this in various communities for quite a while, but Council President Wesson's interest spurred us to create a program, which we're calling Learn and Play, and it involves my staff. We have a special Spanish-speaking outreach librarian that we've just hired recently. And working with the local children's librarians in branches, we are going to actually work with Head Starts, women, infants and children's centers, community or other community organizations to work with the parents who are in those facilities. This means that we can go back to the same families over and over again and have repeated contact. And we can follow outcomes. We can see if parents are starting to read to their children more, to talk with their children more. And we can actually see if we're making some kind of impact. And if we do this long enough with the same families in the same communities, we can actually see there might be a measurable difference in skills.
And thank you, Ms. Mitnick. And if you could expand on, will you do this? And we know it's just a pilot project in the Council President's District.
Exactly.
Will you fund this with existing resources? Are you cobbling together other resources for this program?
Yes, most of the funds are in-kind funds, library funds. It's most of the expenses are staff. It's really the staff doing the work, the children's librarians and also my staff. We are giving away books and other educational materials and toys, as well as educational brochures and things like that. That's funded by our library foundation at the moment. So there's a lot of support out there for this.
And is the program, is it ongoing currently, or do you just kind of have the framework and then you would like to implement it?
We've actually, for about the past almost a year, we've been trying out our models, developing the models that we're using, the various workshop models and so on, at a few different facilities around the city. And we're continuing to do that, but we think we're ready now to go full force with the pilot.
Terrific. Mr. Price.
No, I think this is an exciting opportunity and good program, and I know that encouraging young people to read as early as possible is a proven, established technique for success in the future. And so I'm heartened that we're calling it a pilot, but I'm anxious to see how soon we can expand it, because there are lots of places around the city I think that could really benefit from programs like this.
Absolutely.
Question is, how are we engaging, community, volunteers, other professionals who may be a part of this kind of a project, teaching kids to read is something that appeals to a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
How can we engage interested citizens in a way that provides some quality control, but also helps us to expand this program a lot more expansively?
Councilmember Price, I think that's the key to expansion.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to have a well-trained volunteer force, and we're going to actually look at that this year to see if we can train folks. We have a program right now called Storytelling and Reading STAR, in which volunteers read with children in our libraries. So if we added onto that program and made it more of an outreach program and had them become our core, our early literacy core out in the field, I think that would work really well. So we've got a group of folks who they're really committed, and I think we need that in order to have the capacity to spread out into the rest of the city.
Does this Learn and Play program involve a van that goes around too? Is that a part of this project? Some kind of a mobile?
It's in our budget for the Library Foundation. Okay. They are raising money for a van, which will be filled with books and toys and all kinds of great things.
All right. Thank you. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Terrific. And let's see, we have one public comment card on this issue, and I have no other questions. I think it's a great program as well. So thank you for presenting, Ms. Mitnick. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Heumann, this is item 3, and you wanted to give comment?
Good afternoon, residents. I myself, like many of you, believe in education, and the enforcement of education is always a priority for many within our poverty communities. So at the extent of what's happening here, let's see, it's talking about report from city librarian, response to motion from Mr. Weston Bloomfield. Mr. Weezer, relative, of course, Mr. Weezer came from the school board. It's not important anymore, but relative to the Learn and Play pilot program to help young children start school ready to read and learn. It's obvious we need such programs, and we need more of them. So we have to encourage how to obtain the finances through this budget we're experiencing. The budget obviously can't satisfy many of our concerns, and relatively speaking, it can't impact us if it's a tight budget. So hopefully yourself, Mr. O'Farrell, and since Mr. Price came from LAUSD, you will take the initiative to find that special funding or pockets of funding that Mr. Garcetti tends to find every so often, even without an audit. I'm surprised. So again, like I said a couple days ago on a Tuesday, officers of file and rank deserve pay raises as much as librarians and teachers deserve a right to have the appropriate funding to support these type of programs. So I'm not against it, I'm for it. However, you must have some type of criteria to explain to us more where the funding is coming from and how much you plan to invest in the appropriate communities. Because I hate to say it, Mr. Weezer is unaware that still in Boyle Heights, those of us who live and grew up in poverty, I see it on a daily basis, and I'm in education, and I educate people who are, as some of you would call them, retarded, and they're not. They're physically challenged, and we have plenty of those children nowadays in our schools that are denied a good education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Heumann. Seeing as we do not yet have quorum, I would like to move this item forward as a communication from the chair to the full city council. Is that something that I can do?
Sure.
So I would like to do that with the clear instructions of approving the library department's recommendations and forward to full council for consideration. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Price, what I'd like to do now is, and we'll have to do this from communication from the chair as well, item 1 actually is related to item 2. We do have public comments for 1 and 2, but since 1 is rolling into item 2, I'd like to note and file that. And we do have a representative from Mr. Bonin's office to speak to item 2 in just a moment. So without objection, with communication from the chair, that's what I would like to do. Having said that, do we have any, let me look at this, duplications, people speaking. So what I'd like to do when I call your name for item 2, just combine your comments for items 1 and 2, if we can do that. All right, thank you. So having said that, I would like to go ahead and do the public comments first on item 2. And the first person will be Therese Dietland. Did I say that right? Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, you need to read the item. Yes, thank you.
And could you get some color, because when I looked at it again, I didn't really understand what it was addressing. I'm clear about one, but I'm not clear
Okay.
about two, so any of
We're
them.
going to read it right now. So go ahead and have a seat, since you'll be testifying first. Might as well. Yes.
Item number 2, Board of Recreation and Park Commissioners and City Attorney reports an ordinance relative to amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 42.15 to restrict vending, regulate performing, and prohibit generating noise on beaches or upon immediately adjacent boardwalks, sidewalks, and public ways.
And maybe for the record, read 1 as well, since we're,
Item 1 is motion, Bone and O'Farrell, relative to the status on the latest proposed amendments and/or revisions to the Los Angeles Municipal Code, Section 42.15, to combat new forms of illegal commercial vending on the Venice Beach Boardwalk.
so that's the one we noted and filed, but it's the one issue.
Okay, all right.
Please, thank you.
All right. My name is Therese Dietland. I've been a longtime political activist on the boardwalk. It's been a wonderful venue for me. I really appreciate having this place to go and do what I feel I need to do to reach to the public with issues that I'm concerned about. And these items addressed, I just saw the revisions of the ordinance today, and I must say I'm very pleased with them, because I think they address some of the weaknesses in the current version of 4215. And if they can be enforced, they will go a long way to really helping improve the environment on the boardwalk. When I first went there several years ago, there were lots of people like me, First Amendment, free speech people. They weren't selling anything. They were just out there promoting some concept or discussing and educating the public on a specific issue. There are very few of us left anymore. We've mostly been driven out by commercial vendors. So if we can get rid of those people, that would be very good. And I also like the concept of, if you get a ticket and you don't show up, it's essentially a conviction, so that they can keep escalating the seriousness of the offense, the violation. I think that would be essential to helping to do this. And if this works, thank you, City Council, because we really do need some relief there from the unacceptable commercial vending and the people doing things that are twisting it to get it so that they can be there and have some kind of rationale for what they're doing, but ethically it's just not right. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dietland. And next we'll have Shelley Gomez. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Shelley Gomez. I just wanted to ask you guys, people here on the committee, if you've been to the boardwalk. You know, have you been down there to actually walk it and participate? Do you have an awareness of what goes on there?
These aren't two-way
Okay.
dialogues. I
Well,
can say, yeah.
Good.
I have, certainly
Then-
have. But
then-
it's your comments, though.
Okay, but it gives me an understanding. I've been on the boardwalk as an artist. I do original art. I'm a painter. I paint on the boardwalk. That's where I do all my creation, and I'm a musician as well. And I am a partner with somebody who's been an artist, an activist, a musician for probably 30 years on the boardwalk. And as I read this and have had my own experience, I've actually, as an artist, been ticketed for playing my drum and arrested for playing a drum. Noise violation, which is pretty amazing since that is my spiritual practice and it wasn't even on the boardwalk. But that's part of my concern as I come here today. I believe in community. I believe in cooperation. And what I have experienced on the boardwalk is there's this us against them against us, whether it's the police, the city, and those of us who are on the boardwalk. As I understand it, the boardwalk although it had issues going way back in history, it was full of artists. And then along came the lottery that designated spaces. And in those designated spaces, that allows for a lot of fighting, because if there's a space designated, then you have something to fight over. It attracted commercial vendors, which continues to be the problem. It's getting rid of us, those artists that are there. So I just ask that you consider all this. There needs to be involvement and some kind of body made up of artists and musicians that have dialogue. We started doing that, but it needs to be recognized. So
Thank you, Ms. Gomez.
thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we have Steve Heumann. I hope I said your last name right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Heumann. The company I work for, Sidewalk Enterprises, owns some of the open-air retail parking lots that you might have seen on the boardwalk. So we are very much in favor of the revisions to 4215. For a number of years, the commercial vending on the west side of the boardwalk, the public space, has gotten worse and worse, more intense. And you have people selling the same items that the people who rent from me on the east side are selling. However, they're not paying any rent. They don't pay maybe sales tax. They don't have fire extinguishers, that sort of thing. And 4215, I was very involved in the crafting of that as far as the public was allowed to be, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a good law. It just has no teeth. So these revisions would give the police and the community some teeth, so that the police don't have to waste all of their time and resources trying to do sting operations, undercover work, so that you don't have, and it's not just mom and pop shops on the west side. You have people with numerous stalls, and they play their games it's just a cost of doing business, getting these tickets, playing these games, finding ways to circumvent the law so that they can do business. These revisions, not allowing display, not allowing you to pretend to sell a pen for $20 and giving away a real valuable item, and also making people accountable to either show up or have it escalate in the court system. These are good revisions that will work for the community, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heumann. And now we have Mr. Heumann again.
Good afternoon. Hate to throw a wrench in this essential prejudice and discrimination by the revisions of commercialism on the boardwalk. You take out of practice and out of character what the boardwalk was meant, as you heard, the artists and the people who have been basically harassed, discriminated, and pushed off the boardwalk, that we have tracked the business for you as an investment. And so it's a shame that Mr. Bonin's not here, since it's his district out there, and takes my enjoyment, my relaxation, and my time from the boardwalk just to have this conversation with all of you. Matt Dow, Zuma Dog, Michael Hunt, they had no choice but to sue you guys, because you brought the contest of friction there. And as you use the wording here, Section 4215, to combat new illegal commercial vending. Who say that the city, Mr. LaBonge, who's to say the city is God? You're not God. We, the taxpayers, are demanding, asking that you take the time before you take any action on this matter, because you're violating my rights under ADA, more so under Section 504, that the state and the federal government provided all those beautiful enhancements on the beach for public use. And you're misusing your commercialism ideas based on someone's opinion without transparency from the people on the boardwalk and people like myself, who's an interest participant who pays taxes to have my enjoyment on that beach, no matter where, on any public or state beach. So for the record, under your revisions. I say to you, hold back and stop and think clearly on not just your emotions, but think about what you're doing to my participation, my enjoyment, and those people who love Venice Beach and love the boardwalk's entertainment.
Thank you. Thank you. Public comment on this item is closed, and before we invite City Attorney's Office in Rec and Parks, we're going to have Norman Kula from our colleague Mike Bonan's office. And at this time, I'd like to welcome our colleagues Gil Cedillo and Tom LeBon.
And Mr. President, can we just
Yes, sir.
reflect that we now have a quorum?
And we now have a quorum. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Mike Bon, I'm Norman Cullen. I am Councilman Mike Bonan's senior counsel. Had the privilege also to hold that position for Councilman Bill Rosendahl, so I'm familiar with this matter for a great number of years. Councilman Mike Bonan strongly supports and asks for your yes vote on this. There's really two fundamental changes. This is, of course, an area that has been driven by litigation, management by litigation. Your great city attorney and Rec and Parks folks who we've worked with for many years will describe the particulars, but the gist is this does two things. One, it will make a violation of 4215, the ordinance itself, for those who display something that is prohibited for sale. And there's been a long history of arrests and undercover work that show that people who display what is prohibited for sale, in fact, intend to sell it. And we didn't put that in initially because of the respect for First Amendment rights, which is what this is about. On that side of the boardwalk, the only people permitted to be there, what they're doing, what they're selling, is the equivalent of speech. That's point one. Point two, the people on the boardwalk are very clever, and when they would be cited for these offenses, they simply fail to appear. Well, what happened is their cases were ultimately disposed of as a failure to appear, but not as a violation of 4215, which would trigger a progressively more serious penalty on subsequent violations. So this fixes those two things. It makes people who are obviously there to sell something, they're not prohibited. It is not speech. They can't do it. And secondly, for those who do violate it, it will, if prosecuted and convicted, will be a prior. And that's the whole concept of this incremental change. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kola. If you don't mind sticking around just in case there are questions, at this time I'd like to invite Valerie Flores and Kevin Regan up. Valerie Flores from City Attorney's Office and Kevin Regan from Recreation and Parks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Assistant City Attorney Valerie Flores, and also here today is Assistant General Manager Kevin Regan. I want to do a very short background and also first note that this is a one park specific ordinance. It will apply only to Venice Beach Park. And Venice is very unique in a number of ways. It has a long history of artistic freedom and performance. But it also has some physical characteristics that make it unique. It's very narrow in parts, and it's one of the city's main tourist draws. So it does draw millions of tourists a year, especially during the summer. And there's a very narrow corridor for people to walk on. But because there's a lot of tourism over the years, commercial vending really took hold there, and it had the impact of driving out a lot of the artists and performers who'd historically been the reason that the tourists were showing up there. The fight over different spots on the boardwalk where vending was particularly lucrative resulted in fights and all kinds of criminal activity, not only amongst the vendors, but even some vendors were selling illegal items. And the problem got so bad in recent years that you couldn't even see the beach if you were walking down the boardwalk because vendors had installed huge tents and umbrellas on their sides. So your view of the ocean would be completely blocked for about a mile while you were walking down the boardwalk. The city had an ordinance on the books that restricted vending, but it was overbroad, and it applied to not only commercial vending, but First Amendment vending and performing and artistic expression. So it was challenged in court. And the lawsuit, there were actually multiple lawsuits, and they lasted over a decade. The First Amendment law in the Ninth Circuit was actually evolving while these cases were pending. So we really went up and down the court system, and we even had a circumstance where at one point the judge helped write an ordinance and then later invalidated it as unconstitutional. So it's been this very long saga. Finally, about a couple years ago,
The judge was a federal judge.
yes, who will remain nameless.
But no, but he was a former park commissioner.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yeah.
okay. For the record.
Yes. Anyway, as I said, the law is evolving, so we were all learning as we went along in terms of what would be acceptable. Again, the goal was always to protect First Amendment activities and just restrict commercial vending. And so finally, about 2 years ago, and we have our litigator here, Lori Rittenberg, who handled some of these cases and is very familiar with them. But about 2 years ago, one of the cases involving Venice settled, and the court finally enunciated a standard. The court said you can ban or restrict the vending of anything that's commercial, and commercial means anything that has as its dominant purpose something other than free speech. So the example I always like to give is a coffee mug. So a coffee mug may have a First Amendment protected message on it like "Stop the War." But because you can drink coffee out of it, it has a utility beyond its message, and you can therefore legally restrict its sale. So in an effort to bring artistry and performance back to the boardwalk and cut down on some of the abuses of the commercial vendors, about 2 years ago we instituted a new ordinance in Venice that did just that. It allowed First Amendment vending, like bumper stickers, pamphlets, campaign buttons, art, that sort of thing, but not sunglasses and sort of other T-shirts, touristy items. And when the ordinance went into effect, we noticed a really big improvement, and I think Kevin can speak to that. But there were a number of, and in crafting the ordinance, we tried to do sort of the least restrictive alternative, which the court always wants to see when you're regulating an area that involves First Amendment. So we did the least restrictive ordinance, and we gave it a couple years to see how it was working, and it did actually work well. It did clean up a lot of the abuses, and you did see a return of the vendors and the artists. But there were some vendors who developed these clever workarounds. Sometimes they would have a workaround where they would be pretending to sell a First Amendment protected item like a brochure, but it happened to come with a restricted item. So, for example, there was one vendor who was selling brochures, and it came with a free lotion. So it was clear it was really the lotion being sold, not the pamphlet. One of the other workarounds were people would set up displays of commercial items, and if a police officer would go up and say, "Are you selling those? You can't sell those here." They'd say, "Oh, no, this is my artistic display." But then when they go back in undercover, the vendor would sell them. And so, as you know, the vendors would learn from each other, and pretty soon, again, the commercial vendors using these, sort of workarounds started squeezing out the performers and the artists. And another issue that developed was that vendors who were making a lot of money selling commercial items there were taking these citations as a cost of doing business, just not showing up, forfeiting bail. And in order to have any teeth, these ordinances in our municipal code really need to have progressive penalties. so that you can't just, as a cost of doing business, take a ticket. We've had that problem with parking citations. So sometimes, people were parking and taking the ticket as cheaper than buying a parking pass or doing, going to a permit lot. And unless you have progressive penalties, this clogs up all the available parking. So this was happening in Venice with the available performance spots. So this ordinance now will ban the display of items that may not be sold. It will prohibit someone from giving away for free an item that cannot be vended if you need to buy a First Amendment protected item in order to get the free item. And it will also count non-appearances and bail forfeitures as a conviction, putting you into the progressive penalty system. Some of these changes were asked for by LAPD, and they're here. This will make it easier for them so that rather than wasting their precious resources doing undercover sting operations on commercial vending, they can, deal with other more important criminal issues in the area. But because we now have evidence of many sting operations where these vendors were actually pretending not to sell but were really selling, we think the banning of these practices will be upheld by the court because we can demonstrate that there were these abuses going on. So we wanted to wait until we saw the abuses, had some actual undercover stings that proved that, yes, in fact, people aren't just displaying things for artistic purposes, they're doing it to make sales. And so these fixes, we think, will actually, again, enhance the boardwalk, the very narrow strip, make sure it's not overcrowded, and allow the artists and the performers to have room to do their thing, which is really why the tourists were flocking there to begin with.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Flores. Mr. Regan.
Good afternoon, council members. I would just say that the Department of Recreation and Parks fully agrees with the proposed amendments to Municipal Code Section 42.15. Our Board of Recreation and Parks Commissioners did hear this item and did adopt it with a recommendation that it move forward to council as soon as possible. I would just second everything that Valerie said. I think she gave a very accurate account of what is going on and what was going on the boardwalk. I think it's important just to reiterate that this is an ordinance that has now been actually in effect for several years, and so we've had several years of operation to to determine how the modifications worked that we put in place about 3 or 4 years ago. I kind of lose track of time. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. And so with the big changes that were brought about, I think Valerie spoke to quite well, is that everyone talks about the character, kind of like the flavor, the eclectic, artistic enclave of Venice, and particularly the boardwalk, that mile stretch between essentially 17th Windward Plaza up to the Santa Monica border at Navy. That mile stretch is really just epitomizes the character of Venice. What we used to see there was a lot of public expression, a lot of performance, a lot of art and music. But what it became was really kind of just an overstated flea market with people selling everything you can imagine. I mean, from articles of clothing to I saw a guy that opened up a bicycle repair shop, with tools and the whole thing. So this became like, instead of the free speech and the artistic enclave, it became this kind of like swap meet atmosphere. Everyone wanted to get back to the character of Venice that was described as being eclectic, artistic, and just a little bit fun and whimsical. So that's kind of like what this did. It's what we saw happen. When the ordinance was implemented several years ago, we saw that character coming back. But you have to hand it to folks. People are creative, and they started figuring out ways to get around the ordinance. And it was difficult for the police to constantly make these judgment calls when they didn't have the enforcement tool in the ordinance to be able to do it. We don't want to put the police in that difficult situation. We want them to be able to deal with the situation quickly and move on to the next situation without having to have these prolonged decisions. So in reality, the police are doing a fantastic job. We want to give them the tools to be able to continue to do that, to be able to properly regulate commercial vending, and to really kind of try to bring back that flavor of Venice that everyone really wants to see, particularly the tourists when they go. They're looking to see that. So in closing, I would just say the Department of Recreation and Parks completely supports City Attorney and the amendments to this ordinance.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments?
I just want to thank the City Attorney's Office for this great report, very concise, and want success for this very important part, but also for the safety. The tragedy that took place in Venice is a situation that happens. And Mr. O'Farrell, I was in Saturday night, went to the Yamashiro 100th anniversary, and I went past Hollywood Boulevard, and it's so popular. I think it's that block that you have there, the good work that you've done to create that mecca needs more safety because in the sense there's so many people, and the sidewalks are blocked by people vending stuff that they can get in Amoeba Records, down at Cahuenga. And consequently, people may fall into the street. If you don't control the public space, the space becomes a challenge. And everybody wants to have a good time at the beach. So this is a good effort. So I'm happy to support this. And Mr. Reagan, for your work, with the exception of the one trash can at the Charlie Turner Trailhead this morning, that was full, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Price.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. You both know we are grappling with how we attend to vending at the citywide level. There's a motion for the Economic Development Committee considering some rule changes that would facilitate and regulate that. How is this proposal that impacts the beach only going to impact us to come up with a citywide sort of solution that addresses similar issues and concerns?
Yeah, it won't in two senses. One, this is a park-specific ordinance. It only applies in Venice Beach Park, so it's got a limited geographic boundary. And also, my understanding of the working group that's been formed is looking at opening up permitted sidewalk vending. And so the boardwalk in Venice is actually not a sidewalk. It's actually part of the park property. So the two are completely unrelated, and this Venice ordinance won't impact what the working group on sidewalk vending is doing at all.
But, okay.
Mr. Cedillo.
Yeah, we'll accept that. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, I share my colleagues' concerns. We want to get this right. We can say it's not a precedent, but then it becomes a precedent. This is what everybody will look at. I always have a concern that adverse impacts or unintended consequences will occur. And we have to address this on a citywide level. I mean, the fact of the matter is that there's tons of entrepreneurs that come to this city, and this is the activity that they engage in. And these are choices that people make, and if they make these choices, it's better than other choices. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. Always rather to see somebody selling oranges than begging.
Right.
You know, I mean, these are bad choices, but there's a better one, and these are young entrepreneurs who then end up, I'm seeing it become bigger fruit vendors and then open up, little stores, supermarkets, and then big American success stories. But this is where it begins in many instances. So,
Right. Right. Again, and the other issue that's different about Venice is that it is a very narrow and limited area. So whereas there might be some opportunity for street vending on wide city streets, if done properly, it could actually, enhance the sidewalk experience, like in New York and some other cities that allow sidewalk vending in sort of ways that are manageable. This one stretch of boardwalk in some places is only about 10 feet wide. And again, because of the throngs of tourists that come, especially during the summer, the unregulated vending had gotten to the point where it was actually infringing on the beach experience, the artistic experience. And again, not just the artistic and musical ambiance, but you couldn't even see the beach from all the stands that had been erected. So this park is very much unique, and it's why we've actually tried, we've been sort of experimenting might be the wrong word, but we have been trying to get it right at Venice as a model of how you can do it in areas where you just simply can't accommodate, just because of sheer size limitations, vendors and throngs of tourists. But that's not to say that in other parts of the city, having vending might not add to the cityscape experience and the sort of urban renewal that we're experiencing.
And I mean, Kevin Regan, again, Assistant General Manager, Recreation and Parks. So I think just it's worth repeating one more time that since this ordinance is in effect now, and these are simply amendments, we're prohibiting those types of activities now. These amendments simply help police to be able to do their job in a more efficient manner, and also help city attorneys when they're dealing with the after effects of a citation that is rightfully issued by the police officer, so that it can't just be ignored by the individual that receives it, and that it has to be dealt with through the court system. And also, Valerie and I, because I think we're really just speaking to the amendments, we didn't go into all of the reasons that we originally modified Code Section 4215 at Venice. There was a lot of things happening there that nobody would want to have happen. As an example, people that freely were able to put up a tent enclosed on all four sides, no one could see in, and offer a massage. So you have tourists, many of them from Europe and other countries, maybe not all that savvy about what might be happening in tough parts of LA, and they go in instantly to get a massage and wind up getting molested. Now, you'd say, well, that's not really a vending problem, just deal with it with the police. It became a real problem. The police had difficulty proving it, so one of the solutions was to eliminate those tents that are enclosed on all four sides so that people can't have places where they can hide, where they could sell other illegal items, cigarettes to minors, cigarettes one at a time. We had people offering henna tattoos. The only problem is they weren't using henna. They were using some bizarre concoction of India ink and other toxic materials and putting it on people's skin. Never came off. So those are just a couple examples of some things that were happening on the boardwalk, some things that the police department, recreation and parks department, city attorney were grappling with, not to mention the community outcries for all of the problems that were happening in terms of the congestion, the sales, the fighting between vendors. This ordinance has done so much to help Venice Beach be a better place for everyone, particularly the millions of tourists that come here every year to see it. So I would just reiterate that while I understand the concern about street vending, this is really not what we're targeting here with these provisions. We're looking at a completely different animal. And anyway, that's my speech, and I think Valerie's done a tremendous job. Also, we do have some police officers from Venice here in case you wanted to hear from them.
Got some captains, lieutenants, and P3s. Your bike all the way down Venice.
Those officers should get a medal for working so long in Venice.
I asked Mr. Reagan for the council. I know how hard Mr. Bonnet and Norman back in Mr. Rosenthal's great effort here. What would help the council if you show a good map on the board tomorrow or whenever it's in council, so it shows the defined lines. Because what's the city's width of the area? 60 feet from the sidewalk, from the boardwalk? Is it at 60 feet? I mean, it's very narrow.
Well, it varies, and again, in some places it's only like 10 feet wide.
10 feet. And then it's state land.
No, it's actually a city park.
But if I'm in the water, I'm in the Pacific Ocean.
Right, up to the wet sand, it's public, correct.
There are
But who owns the sand? The county?
The public.
But the county runs the beaches.
There are, Councilmember, there's parts of Venice that are city beach, and there's parts further down that are state beach.
But I think it would help us articulate that.
Okay.
Oh, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Cito has.
Well, thank you. I'll defer to my colleagues' both desires and judgment on this, and to our LAPD, and happy to vote on this.
Since the good officers from LAPD are here, do any of us have questions to them? I think not. Thank you so much. And I have no further.
I don't have any specific questions, but they may have some anecdotal information that may help us to help drive the point home why an enhancement in these regs is important and necessary.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Captain Brian Johnson. I'm the Area Commanding Officer of Pacific Area. And sitting to my left is our Senior Lead Officer Thusing. She's the Senior Lead Officer assigned to Venice Beach. And I would just kind of echo the comments that you've already heard, that these amendments to 4215 will go a long way in allowing the LAPD to go out and do the enforcement efforts that we need to do as it relates to vending along Oceanfront Walk. The problem has already been articulated, is the ability for them to kind of play this cat and mouse game as it relates to the commercial vending, and this will, for the most part, hopefully eliminate that and get us back to the free expression and let us do some of our more important work as it relates to violent crime. Currently, robberies are up 45% along Oceanfront Walk or along the beach area, and violent crime is up about 17%. So when I take resources away to do undercover stings and operations as it relates to these infractions, it doesn't allow me to focus or keep as many resources as I'd like to address our Part 1 crime problems along Oceanfront Walk.
And Captain Johnson, those statistics you just cited, is that year over year?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. Slow Thusing, would you like to add?
Yes. Good afternoon, council members. Officer Peggy Thusing. First and foremost, I would like to thank Councilman Mike Bonin's office and Park and Recreation for even bringing this issue up. It's been a very difficult ride for about the past 10 years enforcing this as an officer. I've seen many artists and performers leave the boardwalk because how commercial it had become. And years ago, it was easy for me to walk along the boardwalk and rightfully see a commercial item and say, hey, you can't do that here. Well, it's been 10 years since I've been able to do that. It literally, in the past, has taken a minimum of 4 officers to do an undercover sting on, one vendor just to see if they're really selling that belt versus displaying it. And we definitely have, better uses of our resources. So as a police officer, I'd like to thank you very much for considering this. It will make our job a lot easier, and it will also help bring back the artists and the true vendors, and the residents and business owners will all be very appreciative of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question. How good is the broken windows concept by James Q. Wilson?
That's a good concept, and actually this is a big part of it, because what we're noticing is a lot of the commercial vendors are hiring some of our individuals down there at the beach to come there real early in the morning and save the space for them. And, yeah, causes a lot of problems.
Right. I would just say for my colleagues too, I understand historically Los Angeles, that's why there's a Tommy's hamburger stand, that's why there's a Tail and the Pup. We absolutely didn't allow any street vending. We didn't want to be New York. That was, if you look at our history and you read Kevin Starr and some of this issue here. As we go forward, I like what you said about oranges and selling that, but also, I don't know about Fritos. Frito-Lay? Oranges? Okay, I got it. All right, but the issue of future vending, I just want to make a point. Parks got to control their space, because if you don't control the park space, then the public is really affected. And the other issue, too, as we look to the future, I'd like to count on, and this is for the CLA, having the planning department really chime in on this other issue of vending, that we all don't have a great fondness for these mini malls, but if you took one space and created and sell fruit, sell something that people are, that makes, that is edible and through the county health department, but is something that would be transform one of those parking spaces into a public space. That's a thought. At CLA, if you'd see me later, I want to give you some direction on that. Thank you, officers, and I don't know when the last time I've been to Venice Beach, but I know it's a very, very special place. And I just to mention that, too, with the tragedy that just took there. I was with the family. It was from the parish church that I go to, and they were truthfully happy that their son died instantly by the shock of the lightning, as opposed to drowning, and because it was many minutes before they found it. And I did meet the paramedics at the funeral, and they were complimentary of the police department and L.A. County and City Fire and all the efforts that you did on that tragic, odd day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, officers. Thank you so much, LAPD. So, colleagues, what I'd like to do is move to approve item 2, amending LAMC section 4215, the recommendations we just heard with the accompanied draft ordinance without objection.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a second, and sounds like we have no objection to moving this item forward.
And Mr. Chair, now that we have a full quorum, do you want to go back and revisit items 1 and 3 for voting?
Right. Item 1, item 1 we noted and filed because it's related to item 2, what we just moved forward. Item 3 was a report on a pilot program from the Library Department in Council President Herb Weston's office that did not call for additional resources. And we had a great explanation by Ms. Mitnick from the Library Department. And I recommended communication from the chair that we approve that item as well.
Before the officers leave, I want to make sure the officers, each of you been to the top of City Hall? Yes, sir. All of you have? All right, I want you to go up because you have the greatest badge in the history of policing in the world. And that badge is this building was a testament to the belief of the city and the people. And if you could, Captain, give a few extra minutes, just right up to the top. It's a worthy view. Just a few. We got to get back to the beach. All right, good.
And I think a field trip is in order to Venice Beach. It's been a little while since I've been there, too, but I've been there dozens of times. Thank you. Thank you so much. There is no more business before us, but we do have one general public comment from Mr. Heumann before we adjourn.
I'm going to committee. My committee on the fourth floor.
Committee of one?
Yeah, you got it. Thank you, Mayor.
So in addition to the many problems that we're solving here in Los Angeles, I'm pretty positive that tomorrow's meeting will go well, and we see that these reconsiderations by unanimous vote will fulfill the needs of public interest, those of us who are the essential, real taxpayers that look forward to not just events, but we look forward for projects, activities, and events that fall under the American Disability Act so that none of us, whether we're elderly or disabled, will be excluded from your action of business to support and protect the public's welfare in areas that are designated for our use and our creativity to sit and enjoy. So let's not take away from my appreciation of what I enjoy the most, which is my time off at the beach with family or with friends. And even among the boardwalk people, who a lot of them have become my friends, Dollhouse Dude, Zuma Dog, and many other vendors that I always say hello to and purchase items from, and sometimes even take their advice. So there's nothing wrong in extending, again, what we need from them. It's unfortunately that this meeting, though, falls and elapses with the budget in room 1010 today at 2 p.m. It's, to me, a little conflict of interest because I'm sure I would have loved to be there and listen in to Mr. LaBonge or even Mr. Busquiano as they sat in that meeting before they walked in 30 minutes a little late. But stay on note. We heard Batman was at City Hall. We saved UCLA. We're getting a new floor. And the Bruins will continue to play. And hopefully the infrastructure of our city will be, in the future, corrected, repaired, and fixed so that we don't have to have any of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heumann. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned.